I'm now going to talk to Lord Coe. In the humid heat of Singapore exactly 20 years ago, the 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games were awarded to London. Inspire a generation was the slogan for that brilliant summer of sport. A summer I'm sure that pretty much all of us can remember in our own way. Now, Sebastian Coe is the president of World Athletics, and he was the mastermind behind the Games, and he joins us now from Silverstone. Good morning, Lord Coe.
A very wet Silverstone. Good morning.
Is it? Oh, wow, OK. I hope they've got the safety car out.
They have, actually.
Going back to that day, that July in now 20 years ago, what's your standout memory?
Oh, I think it was the closeness of the result. I mean, we snuck across the line with 4 votes in 104. We talk about elections, we talk about marginality. That's about as close an election as I'll ever fight. And we got across the line in large part because of the people of the UK that came in behind us. And the momentum towards the vote itself was palpably growing, but it was uncertain right up to the last moment. So I think it was really just the enormity of what we achieved that day, but then the recognition that for the next 7 years we were really going to have our work cut out to deliver something that made the country proud and did leave a lasting legacy.
What was our edge, do you think?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
What was our edge?
I think in any campaign you look back and you think you want to make less, in a way, I know this sounds slightly pessimistic, but you want to make less mistakes than the opposition teams. And I think the consistency of our message, the fact that we really identified not just how we were going to do what we did, but why we were doing it, the articulation around what we could do in East London, for instance, a desolate parcel of land, 520 hectares, that when we started the bidding process was really badly underdeveloped. London's economy had left it largely untouched for a long time. And I think being able to articulate why we wanted to do what we wanted to do, the change to the landscape, that you've only got to go to that land now in East London to see the 3 universities, the Sadler's Wells, the Tate, the Westfield Shopping Centre, and home, of course, to thousands of people. We built, I think, the articulation around building a new city inside an old city in 7 years, and with timelines that were immutable. You couldn't just suddenly say, well, we want to move the opening ceremony a few days because we haven't quite finished the stadium. And I also think, for me, I guess as a former jobbing politician, the key element in all that was, for the first time and for a long time, this was a really politically bipartisan project. Good opposition spokespeople became really well-versed, good ministers. And Tessa Jowell, who we owe so much to, who was in large part the driving force behind the then government to back the bid, actually seamlessly became a really supportive opposition spokesman. And I think it left people with comfort that this didn't become a political football. And if I may say so, I think there are some very big issues that the United Kingdom faces that the London Games proved a really good blueprint for, and maybe, the delivery of healthcare could be looked at in exactly that bipartisan way.
Well, I want to ask you, actually, about the current situation. I think you were slightly more than a jobbing politician, actually. I think at one point you could have been mayor of London. And I wonder if you think that we could do this now. We could have that bipartisan approach. We could bring people together in that same way.
I would like to be able to answer that question with a resounding yes. I'm not so sure. I think the world of politics, particularly domestically, has changed. And I'm not sure really for the better. But I do think that if you have a project, and remember, Trevor, when we were when I was busily telling everybody, don't worry, we can manage this, it was set against a backdrop of hardly unalloyed joy around the delivery of the dome. Wembley, changed its spec about 6 or 7 times. I think, in large part, if you have a project and you're prepared to articulate it and you're prepared to discuss it openly and take people with you, I think you can get that bipartisan approach. But at the moment, some of these bigger issues do seem to get bogged down into sort of tribal positions, and that never happened during the London years. And I think it's it's a personal observation, I know, but I think it's a pretty good benchmark.
So I know it's very noisy out there, but let's persevere for a little bit longer, because there's a couple of things I want to ask you about. You are a big figure on the global sports stage now. One of the things that a lot of people in your world are talking about is Mr. Trump's travel ban on countries like Afghanistan, Cuba, Venezuela. What impact is that going to have on international sports, particularly athletics?
Look, I think we accept that, we talked about, this being the 20th anniversary of the London bid. I think we accept, even though the landscape was pretty complicated then, we had boots on the ground in the Gulf, and it was a complicated landscape. I think we accept globally, particularly at this moment, it's probably about as complicated as it has been, and particularly in the world of sport. Look, travel bans around whether it's about visas or whether it's been about the length of stay is not an unusual issue, and America is not the only country that has implemented that. Interestingly, the first big test for that globally will be next year, because World Athletics has its World Cross Country Championships in Tallahassee, Florida. And already we are working with various agencies in the US to make sure that we get the athletes that are eligible to compete there, and that there does need to be some derogation. And look, this isn't an unusual landscape, and America, as I've said, is certainly not the only one. But we will work our way through this, and it's now just one of the bigger challenges that organisations like World Athletics and FIFA and the International Olympic Committee have to confront.
Can I just very briefly bring you back to the legacy of 2012? And part of the legacy was, as you were saying, the infrastructure. But another part of the legacy was supposed to be the nation's health. Recently, we hear that a quarter of primary school children leave school, and they leave primary school, and they are obese. These are children who have been born since 2012. Isn't that a scandal?
It's a multifaceted problem, and the problem we have, and it's a large part, it's a political problem. We tend to see obesity as being purely a health issue. It isn't. It's about tax and spend. It's about good healthcare policies, obviously, but it is actually also about having good sports policies. It's about funding youth programs properly. And yes, we set out with a very clear ambition. It was to inspire a generation. More people are actually now running, more people are cycling, more people are doing many of the sports that have an endurance and aerobic capacity. But yes, you're right, the challenge, and it's a growing challenge. I was with the Indian Prime Minister only a few months ago. We talked about fragilities and challenges and global politics. And the thing that really focused him was, how does he get a generation of young people into programs of physicality? So I think London did something that actually managed to stem the flow. Up until that point, we were really hemorrhaging participation. It has at least stabilised, but no, Trevor, you're right, it is the biggest challenge. Between the age of 8 and 12, the average child in the UK becomes 50% less active. And that is not just a health issue, that is something governments have to see as a cross-cutting issue.
I'm sorry, Lord Coe, we're going to have to wrap there. So good to talk to you. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Pleasure. Thank you.